Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips' Incognito. This is the classified edition from Icon. Now, Icon was an imprint that Marvel made back in the day to keep their creatives happy when they had some good creatives actually working, and they would have them publish their creator-owned stuff under this imprint so it wouldn't interfere with their Marvel contracts. Ed Brubaker was one of those. Bendis was another one, and Ed Brubaker did this with Incognito. And I believe there's an Image Comics edition of this, but this is the classified edition. It actually covers two different series. There's a first series of 6 issues and a second follow-up issues. And it covers this guy who you don't know a lot about him at first, and I'm going to have to be very careful about the pages I turn to in here because, of course, Sean Phillips and Ed Brubaker are known for drawing their little boobies, which are not approved of on YouTube, so we cannot do that. And so this guy is actually under a witness protection program. That's why he's incognito. And he was a supervillain. And so he was working for the Supervillain Society. He ended up ratting out this guy called Black Death, who's like the worst of the worst. And he is just hiding in an office right now, living a life, trying to be under the radar, and just like everything's miserable because of it. And so eventually he gets back into things by, of course, just fighting some crime. He realizes that drugs actually counteract something that's removing his powers, which is what the federal agents were giving him. And he is able to do some drugs, go out and fight crime, and of course impress people and start to win. As he starts to do so, he starts to draw the notice of these supervillains from his past and everything. And of course the superhero team, which is kind of like S.H.I.E.L.D. in a lot of ways. Now, all these characters that are in here are kind of, I'd say, tributes to 1930s, 1940s pulp characters. So you see people who are like the Shadow or like Fu Manchu, things like that over the course of this. And there's like evil doctors with their labs. And it's a lot of fun over the course of this. Now, it's a little bit of a departure from like the kind of the crime noir stuff that Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips do. But it's very similar, like kind of like to Sleeper in that regard, where there's like spy games going on between these people. At the end of it, the first arc, which is actually the best part, he ends up finding out who he is, finding out he's like this mastermind clone of some other guy from the past, and him and his quote brother, who he thought were around, were actually just clone bodies that this guy was intending on using at some point, but that guy ended up dying, and so he's got his own body now. He's almost not even a real person. He very dark stuff throughout the entire thing here. He ends up going to work for the S.H.I.E.L.D. type agency. They call themselves SOS in this. And then that ends the storyline. Now, in the next one called Bad Influences, this is a 5-issue arc. Not quite as good. There's a lot of personal stuff with his background, trying to figure out who he is. That's a mystery. He doesn't really know where he came from. That's really not part of the second one. In this one, he's actually a field agent for that group. And I'm going to try to just put up a page that's not going to offend Google. Okay, cool. And he ends up going and pretending to be a rogue agent to go back into the darkness in order to root out some people and some bad people. Down there, one of the SOS agents has been embedded so long, he's kind of gone crazy. And he's like realized that SOS and the bad guys like are all part of the flip of the same coin. He does one of those sort of weird moral things where he's like, you know what, nobody's good or bad. It's just what you do with it. And of course, our hero here is forced to kind of kill him towards the end of it. And so he ends up kicking him and, of course, causing a lot of damage in the process. The guy who had no morals did even more damage, and he did it to a level where, of course, our hero ends up not being believed in his story, what happens here. And it ends up he gets thrown in prison with some, like, how am I going to actually escape from this as a twist. Now, that lends to the fact that, like, there probably should be a third volume of this that should shut things, kind of complete the arc as a trilogy, I guess. But it never happens. That's the end of this right here. Neat stuff in the back of this. Sean Phillips and Ed Brubaker did like this trailer sort of deal where they kind of explained the concept in 2 pages, which is really cool here. There's a lot of covers in the back, a lot of process stuff. There's essays about pulp characters that came from the original issues as well. So you get to kind of really dive into what the actual influences were. And they took a lot of care into all of this. Now, overall, I think the second arc was a lot less emotionally impactful because like you had all the really wild twists and turns of the first one. And so it wasn't quite as good, but it was still fun read overall. And I enjoyed this. Not my favorite Sean Phillips and Ed Brubaker work, but it is up there as just a really good read in general. So I call this one a 7.5 out of 10. And that's it for the Incognito edition. Hit that like and subscribe button. And of course, we'll be back soon.